He called me mediocre while spreading butter on his toast. Not angry, not joking, just calm, like he was stating the weather, like it was something obvious about me that I had somehow missed. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Maricela Vaughn. I'm 34 years old. Until that morning, I thought I had a good marriage. My husband, Callum Devereaux, works in corporate strategy. He wears tailored suits, speaks in polished sentences, and always sounds certain. I used to admire that about him. That morning felt normal at first. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of the coffee machine. Sunlight came through the windows. I was telling him about a small freelance project I had just finished. I expected him to say something encouraging. Instead, he sighed. "You're talented," he said. "But you've gotten comfortable. You don't push yourself. You're mediocre." The word sat between us. I laughed at first. I thought he was teasing me. "Excuse me?" He didn't look up from his plate. "I just mean you settle. You used to have bigger goals. Now you're satisfied designing logos from home. Meanwhile, the women at my firm are building real careers." The women at his firm. He said it like comparison was natural. Like I should feel grateful he married someone safe. I felt my chest tighten, but I stayed calm. I asked him what he meant. He explained that I had potential, but lacked ambition. That I chose an easy life. I didn't remind him that I paused my full-time career when he went back for his MBA. I didn't mention the nights I stayed up helping him rehearse presentations. I didn't talk about how I handled the house, the bills, the social events, so he could focus on climbing. Instead, I nodded slowly. He finished breakfast, kissed my forehead like nothing had happened, and left for work. I stood in the kitchen long after the door closed. The house felt different. Smaller. Quieter. That one word kept repeating in my head. Mediocre. I walked through the living room, looking at the framed photos on the wall. Vacations I planned. Holidays I hosted. A life I thought we built together. Suddenly I saw it from another angle. When had I stopped making decisions for myself? When had I started asking for permission? Later that day, I opened my laptop to work on a design draft. My hands hovered over the keyboard. For the first time, I didn't feel proud of what I was doing. I heard his voice instead. Comfortable. Safe. Mediocre. But beneath the hurt, something else started to form. Not tears. Not anger. Something colder. I replayed the last few years in my mind. The small comments. The advice that sounded supportive but always led me to step back. The way he handled all our finances, because he was better with numbers. The way he introduced me at work events as someone who kept busy with creative things. Maybe this wasn't just about one word. Maybe it had been building for a long time. That morning, something shifted inside me. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself. I just started paying attention. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing things I had ignored for years. It wasn't big fights or dramatic scenes. It was small moments. Tiny comments. The way Callum corrected me in front of others. The way he explained things I already understood. The way he always sounded slightly amused when I talked about my work. One evening, we were at a dinner party with neighbors. Someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, Callum smiled and said, "Maricela does some freelance design. It keeps her busy." Keeps her busy. Like I was doing crafts to pass time. I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I felt something sink. I remembered when I used to manage full branding campaigns. When I had a team. When I had deadlines that scared me in a good way. I didn't keep busy. I built things. But somewhere along the line, I agreed to scale back. It had seemed logical at the time. When Callum decided to go back to school for his MBA, we talked about finances. About time. About focus. One of us had to be flexible. I chose to be that person. "I can freelance from home," I had told him back then. "It'll be temporary." Temporary turned into permanent. He got his degree. He climbed quickly in his company. Promotions. Bonuses. New suits. Bigger expectations. And I quietly stayed in the background, making sure everything else ran smoothly. I handled the house. The social calendar. The holidays with his family. I adjusted my workload whenever his job demanded more attention. I told myself that's what partners do. But now, after that breakfast, I started replaying conversations differently. Whenever I mentioned taking on a larger project, he would say, "Are you sure you want that stress?" When I talked about applying for a creative director role a few years ago, he said, Wouldn't that change our balance? When I considered renting a small studio space downtown, he reminded me how convenient it was to work from home. At the time, it sounded caring. Now it sounded limiting. One afternoon, I met my friend Tamsin Rowe for coffee. Tamsin has known me since college. She was there when I won my first design award. When I stayed up all night building my portfolio. When I was fearless. She looked at me carefully as I told her about the mediocre comment. "He said that?" she asked. I nodded. Tamsin leaned back. "Mari, you were never mediocre. You just made room for him." Her words hit harder than his. On the drive home, I felt embarrassed. Not because of what he said, but because I had believed parts of it. I had slowly accepted a smaller version of myself. Not in one big decision, but in 100 quiet compromises. That night, I watched him from across the living room as he worked on his laptop. He looked confident, important, focused. I wondered if he even realized what he had taken from me, or if I had handed it over so easily that he assumed it was his right. For the first time in years, I opened an old folder on my computer. My previous full-time projects, campaigns I led, concepts I created from scratch, emails from clients praising my work. Reading them felt like meeting an old version of myself. And I realized something simple but powerful. I wasn't mediocre. I had just been shrinking. A few nights later, Callum invited me to a formal dinner with some of his colleagues. He said it was important for visibility. I wore a navy dress he once said made me look elegant and understated. At the time, I thought that was a compliment. The restaurant was expensive and quiet, the kind where everyone speaks in calm, controlled voices. I stayed close to him as he introduced me to people from his firm. "This is my wife, Maricela," he said smoothly. "She's into design. Very creative. Into design. Not a designer. Not someone with a career. Just into it." I smiled politely. I told myself I was overthinking. But then I noticed something else. When he spoke to the women at the table, senior analysts, directors, his tone shifted. He asked about their projects, their strategies, their long-term goals. He sounded impressed. No one asked me anything beyond where we lived and how long we'd been married. At one point, I excused myself to use the restroom. On my way back, I slowed down when I heard Callum's voice from around the corner. He was speaking to a man named Brennan Cade. "She's talented," Callum said, "but she never really pushed herself. Some people just don't have that fire." They both chuckled softly. I stood there frozen. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't need to. The message was clear. The word mediocre wasn't a random comment. It was how he described me when I wasn't in the room. I walked back to the table with steady steps. I didn't confront him. I didn't let my face change. But something inside me shifted again, this time deeper. When we got home, he went straight to his office to answer emails. I went upstairs, my mind racing. For the first time in years, I logged into our main bank account. Callum usually handled finances. I trusted him. I never felt the need to check. But that night I did. I noticed several large transfers labeled as investment allocation. They had been moved into an account I didn't recognize. The name attached to it wasn't his personal name. It was an LLC I had never heard of. My stomach tightened. I clicked through past months. The transfers weren't new. They had been happening quietly for almost a year. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to think clearly. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was a work-related investment. But why hadn't he mentioned it? We had always discussed major financial decisions, or at least I thought we had. I went downstairs and asked casually, "Hey, what's Devereaux Strategic Holdings?" He barely looked up. "Just something for future investments. It's complicated." "Why didn't we talk about it?" "It's just smart planning, Mari. You don't need to stress about it." "You don't need to stress about it." That tone again. Calm. Dismissing. Final. I nodded slowly and walked away. But this time, I didn't let it go. I returned to the account later that night and took screenshots. Every transfer. Every date. Every detail. If he thought I lacked fire, he was about to learn how wrong he was. After that night, I stopped reacting emotionally. I started thinking clearly. The first thing I did was call someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Draven Hallbrook. He used to be my creative director when I worked full-time in Boston. He was demanding but fair. He always told me I had leadership instincts. When he answered, he sounded surprised but warm. We talked casually at first. Then I told him I was considering stepping back into bigger projects. He didn't hesitate. "I always wondered why you disappeared from the industry," he said. You were one of the strongest minds on my team. Strongest. Not mediocre. Not safe. We agreed to meet in Boston the following week under the excuse of visiting Tamsin. I didn't tell Callum the real reason. I just said I needed a change of scenery. When I met Draven in person, I brought my updated portfolio. I had spent nights quietly rebuilding it. He reviewed it carefully, asking sharp questions. I felt nervous, but alive. You're still sharp, he said finally. If anything, you've matured. You just stopped challenging yourself. His words were honest, not cruel. There was a difference. On the train ride home, I realized something. I had allowed my world to shrink to fit Callum's comfort. And he had grown used to that smaller version of me. The second thing I did was open a private bank account in my name only. I transferred a small legal amount of my freelance earnings into it. Nothing dramatic. Just a start. Then I scheduled a consultation with a family attorney recommended by Tamsin, Celeste Ibarra. I told Callum I had a dentist appointment. Celeste was calm and direct. I explained the financial transfers, the LLC, the house ownership. She asked detailed questions. She didn't look surprised. Many spouses create separate investment vehicles, she said. The key question is transparency. Were you informed and did you consent? I shook my head. She explained my rights. Because I had financially supported Callum during his MBA years and contributed consistently to household income, I had legal standing. The house was jointly owned. Any hidden assets could be reviewed in discovery if it ever came to that. Walking out of her office, I didn't feel scared. I felt steady. Back home, I played my role perfectly. I smiled at dinner. I asked about his day. I nodded when he spoke about upcoming promotions. I didn't mention Boston. I didn't mention Celeste. Callum seemed relaxed. Confident. Almost smug. He believed the breakfast comment had settled something, that he had placed me back in my lane. Instead, it had awakened something he couldn't see. Late at night, while he slept, I worked. I refined proposals. I updated my resume. I calculated our shared assets quietly. The tears were gone. In their place was clarity. After that, I became very careful. I stopped questioning him. I stopped correcting him. I even stopped defending myself. If he thought I was comfortable and harmless, I let him believe it. Callum seemed happier. More relaxed. He started staying out later, saying there were more networking dinners and strategy meetings. I didn't argue. I simply listened. One evening, he mentioned a new colleague, Leora Bennett. He described her as sharp and driven. The way he spoke about her was different. There was energy in his voice. Respect. I only nodded. A few weeks later, he said he had to attend a private client dinner downtown. Something about his tone made me uneasy. Not suspicious yet, just aware. That night, I checked our shared credit card statement. The charge was at a high-end restaurant. For 2 people. I didn't confront him. I waited. The next month, another charge. Same place. Again for 2. I began documenting everything. Dates. Times. Financial records. It wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about patterns. One afternoon, while organizing laundry, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. It wasn't romantic, no flowers, no gifts. Just another dinner. But on the back, written in neat handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for believing in me." My chest tightened, but I didn't cry. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at that small piece of paper. Emotional betrayal doesn't always start with dramatic scenes. Sometimes it starts with admiration, with someone making you feel important, the way he once made me feel. That evening, I placed the receipt back where I found it. I acted normal at dinner. I asked about his meeting. He mentioned Leora casually, said she had potential. She reminds me of how ambitious I was at her age, he added. I swallowed and forced a soft smile. Inside, something hardened. At the same time, Draven called with unexpected news. The boutique branding agency he was part of was expanding. One of the senior partners was retiring. They were considering bringing in someone new, someone creative but strategic. He asked if I would consider relocating to Chicago. It felt like the universe testing me. Chicago meant independence, a real position, a partnership opportunity. It also meant leaving everything familiar. I didn't answer immediately. I asked for time. That night, Callum came home later than usual. He looked distracted but satisfied, like someone whose world was moving forward. I watched him carefully. I realized he no longer saw me as an equal. He saw me as stable background support, predictable and unthreatening. For the first time, I imagined a future without him. And instead of fear, I felt something unexpected. Relief. I took 3 days to think about Chicago. During those 3 days, I watched my life carefully. Every detail, every habit, every routine that revolved around Callum's schedule. On the second night, we had our anniversary dinner. He chose the restaurant. He always did. It was elegant, quiet, the kind of place where everything feels controlled. Halfway through the meal, he raised his glass and smiled. To smart decisions, he said lightly. Like marrying someone steady instead of spectacular. The couple at the next table laughed politely, thinking it was a joke. I felt the words land differently this time. Steady instead of spectacular. He didn't see the damage. He didn't even see me. I set my glass down slowly and smiled back. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. I simply observed him, his confidence, his certainty, the way he believed I would always remain exactly where he placed me. That night, when we returned home, he fell asleep quickly. I went into the living room with my laptop. I opened every financial document I had quietly saved. The transfers to his LLC. The joint property documents. My records of supporting him during his MBA. I organized everything neatly in a folder. Then I opened Draven's email again. The offer was clear. Partnership track within a year. Equity share. Leadership role. Relocation support. I stared at the screen for a long time. For years, I had made choices based on what was best for us. That night, I asked myself a simple question. What is best for me? The answer came easily. The next morning, after Callum left for work, I called Draven. I'm in, I said. He didn't sound surprised. I knew you would be. After that call, I contacted Celeste again. I told her I was ready to move forward strategically. Not emotionally. Strategically. We discussed timing, asset protection, legal steps. I wasn't rushing into a dramatic confrontation. I was preparing carefully. Over the next week, I transferred the legal portion of joint liquid funds into a protected account under Celeste's guidance. Everything documented. Everything within my rights. I packed nothing yet. I said nothing yet. But inside, the decision was final. A few nights later, Callum mentioned another late dinner. He adjusted his tie in the mirror and barely glanced at me. You're quiet lately, he said. Just thinking, I replied. About what? Growth. He smiled faintly, assuming I meant him. He had no idea. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because I was hurting him. Not because I wanted revenge in a loud, dramatic way. But because I was no longer shrinking. The morning he called me mediocre, he believed he was defining me. He didn't realize he was setting me free. 3 weeks later, everything was ready. Celeste finalized the paperwork. The financial records were organized. My new contract in Chicago was signed but confidential. I had arranged temporary housing and scheduled my move quietly. I chose a Tuesday. Nothing dramatic about a Tuesday. That felt right. That morning, I made breakfast like usual. Coffee. Toast. Eggs. Calm. Callum scrolled through his phone while eating, barely looking up. I'll be late tonight, he said. Big meeting. I nodded. Okay. When he left, I didn't cry. I walked upstairs and placed a folder neatly on the dining table. Inside were the divorce papers, highlighted sections regarding asset division, and a formal letter from Celeste requesting full financial disclosure, including Devereaux Strategic Holdings. I packed one suitcase. Just essentials. The rest would be shipped later. Then I drove to Boston for a few days before heading to Chicago. Callum called around 6:30 that evening. What is this? His voice wasn't calm anymore. It's a filing, I said evenly. You're overreacting. No, I replied. I'm adjusting. He laughed sharply. You can't just take half the funds. I didn't. I took what's legally mine. Silence. You wouldn't survive without me, he said finally, frustration creeping in. You don't even have a real career anymore. That sentence would have crushed me months ago. Now it felt outdated. I guess we'll both find out, I answered. By the end of the week, his lawyer contacted Celeste. The tone shifted quickly once they reviewed the documentation. My financial contributions during his MBA years. The joint property ownership. The unreported investment transfers. He hadn't expected resistance. He had expected compliance. Instead, he found preparation. Over the next month, the negotiations became tense. The hidden LLC triggered deeper financial review. It wasn't illegal, but the lack of transparency worked against him in settlement discussions. For the first time in our marriage, Callum wasn't in control of the narrative. He called several times, alternating between anger and softness. "You're blowing up our life," he said once. "No," I corrected him. "I'm building mine." Meanwhile, I arrived in Chicago. The city felt loud, alive, full of movement. My temporary apartment overlooked a busy street. The first morning there, I stood by the window with coffee and realized something simple. No one in this city knew me as someone's wife. I was just Maricela, and for the first time in years, that felt enough. Chicago forced me to wake up fast. On my first day at the agency, I walked into a bright office filled with energy. Conversations about campaigns, clients, deadlines. No one looked at me as someone keeping busy. They looked at me as a partner. Draven introduced me formally during the morning meeting. He listed my previous achievements, projects I had almost forgotten about. As he spoke, I felt something rebuilding inside me. Confidence. The work was intense from the start. Strategy sessions ran long. Clients asked hard questions. Deadlines stacked quickly. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, I felt sharp. Focused. Alive. Within 2 months, I led a full rebranding campaign for a regional architecture firm. I handled negotiations, creative direction, and client presentations. When the contract closed successfully, the team applauded in the conference room. No one called me safe. No one called me mediocre. Meanwhile, the divorce proceedings continued back in Connecticut. Callum's tone changed again. The arrogance faded. His messages became shorter, more cautious. During financial discovery, his separate LLC was fully examined. The investment transfers he once brushed off as complicated were now part of official legal review. While nothing illegal surfaced, the secrecy worked against him in settlement discussions. His firm conducted an internal audit when questions about personal financial structuring reached upper management. It didn't destroy him, but it slowed his promotion track significantly. For the first time, his progress stalled. 6 months after I left, he asked to meet in person. I agreed. We chose a neutral cafe halfway between our cities. When he walked in, he looked tired, less polished. He studied me carefully. "You look different," he said. "I am." He cleared his throat. "I shouldn't have said what I did." I didn't respond. "I was under pressure," he continued. "I didn't mean mediocre the way it sounded." "But you meant it," I said calmly. He hesitated. He tried a different angle. "We built a life together. We can fix this." I looked at him steadily. "You built a life where I stayed small." Silence stretched between us. "I underestimated you," he admitted quietly. That was the closest he had ever come to honesty. "But it wasn't enough." "I didn't leave to punish you," I said. "I left because I remembered who I was." We finalized the settlement shortly after. The house was sold. Assets divided fairly. Clean break. Back in Chicago, our agency secured a major national contract. My equity share increased. My name was officially listed as partner on the company website. One evening, standing alone in the office after everyone left, I thought about that breakfast months ago. The toast. The sunlight. The word mediocre. It felt like it belonged to someone else now. 2 years passed quietly. Life didn't explode into something dramatic or flashy. It simply became steady in a different way, a way I chose. North Ember Collective grew faster than any of us expected. We expanded into 2 floors of the building. I led multiple national campaigns. My name appeared in a regional business journal highlighting emerging creative leaders in Chicago. The morning the article was published, I bought a copy and sat by my apartment window with coffee. There was my photo, my title, my words. No one's wife. No one's background support. Just me. Around the same time, I heard through mutual connections that Callum's career had plateaued. The internal audit at his firm had slowed his rise. Nothing scandalous. Nothing dramatic. Just enough hesitation from leadership to keep him from the executive role he had been chasing. He had built his identity on constant upward movement. When that movement slowed, so did his confidence. A few weeks later, I attended a large networking gala downtown. It was elegant but lively. Architects, investors, designers, executives, the kind of room that once intimidated me. Now it felt like home. Halfway through the evening, I turned and saw him. Callum stood near the bar, speaking to a small group. He looked the same at first glance, tailored suit, controlled posture. But when his eyes met mine, something flickered. Surprise. Then uncertainty. He excused himself from his group and walked toward me. "Maricela," he said softly. "Callum." We stood there for a moment, measuring the distance between who we were and who we had become. I've been seeing your name everywhere, he admitted. You've done well. I've worked hard, I replied. He nodded slowly. I was wrong about you. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't soften the moment. You weren't wrong about me, I said gently. You just described the version of me that stayed small for you. He didn't argue. Across the room, someone called my name. A client. I smiled instinctively and waved. Callum noticed. You seem happy, he said. I am. And it was true. Not because he struggled. Not because I won. But because I no longer needed his approval to measure my worth. He looked like he wanted to say more. Maybe apologize again. Maybe explain himself. But some conversations lose power with time. I should get back, I said politely. As I walked away, I felt light. Not angry. Not bitter. Just free. The morning he called me mediocre was the last day I believed him. He thought he was defining my limits. Instead, he revealed them and gave me the courage to step beyond them. And that was something he could never take back.